All right. Good evening, Dr. Henry.
Good evening. Good evening. How are you doing, Pastor Paul?
Man, I am sitting here watching this countdown and this intro, and I'm saying, man, it is Friday night. I need a hype man in my house, man. The later this gets, I feel like, man, I gotta boost my energy so that we come on. It's because it's been one of those days, brother.
Listen, it's been one of those weeks, man.
Yes, sir.
First of all, we are praying, man, for the people there in Israel and Gaza. I mean, wow. It is just horrific what's going on over there in the Middle East. And so our prayers definitely go out for the people there. And I tell you, things happen so quickly, you know what I mean? And it's like, man, we just got to stay prayed up.
Yeah, you think about for so many people, just it's a wholly different world this week for them than it was last week.
Yes.
And it's just amazing to realize how like you said, how quickly things can change. And so again, our hearts and our prayers and stuff go out to so many of our brothers and sisters of both places, whether they're in Gaza, whether they're in Israel. Yeah, we're praying. Another thing that came to mind today, I know our here in Southeastern Conference, our president pulled us together, and I think this is well for us to put out today. All over the world, there was a former leader of Hamas who called for this day, Friday, October the 13th, interesting that date, to be a day of worldwide jihad, day of jihad. And they pointed out the idea that particularly for those in our faith community who worship on the seventh day, who worship on Sabbath, that when emotions are high, when everything is up, that there are some things can start to look alike. And so just throughout the weekend, we're asking our members here in this part of the field, and I think we are even asking our audience tonight, Pastors Roundtable, just be a little extra vigilant. How you say that word? Vigilant over the weekend. As things, people look at sometimes they think that only Jewish communities are the ones that worship on the seventh day, that worship on Sabbath. And a lot of times things can get a little mixed up and get a little fuzzy, those lines can. So we just implore you over this particular weekend to just be vigilant as we move in and out of our places of worship on tomorrow.
That's right. Always good to know that Jesus is still on the throne. You know what I mean, Pastor Paul? He's still on the throne, man. And that makes us come, here at the Pastors Roundtable, talking about current issues, talking about things that impact us. And so we're so happy that you're able to join us tonight as we continue our conversation here at the Pastors Roundtable, and as we pray for our brothers and sisters around the world. We know that some people are coming on tonight, Pastor Paul. I do see some people there in the chat.
There's some people I don't see.
That's right.
I always forget which way to point, but it's this way.
That's it. You got the way. So that's Pastor Wade. He will be coming on sometime tonight.
He's on his way.
Ministry. But we see Colleen Moody is in the chat, and Rodney Smith, Stephanie Scott, part of the team. She's in the chat as well, coming all the way from Huntsville,
Alabama. All right, Dr. Henry, let's get this thing rolling, man. We've got something that we need to ask those of you who are on right now to do before we go any further. Dr. Henry, I need you to hit that appeal, man. What is it?
Listen, it's time to share, man. It's time to share. Look, tonight we are dealing with a topic that impacts a lot of people.
Mercy.
And so we want to make sure that you share this feed, share it to your pastor, share it to your ministry team, share it to your members, your friends. this is the time to share it. I'm telling you. And we got two of the best that's going to be here tonight talking about this subject.
Yep, find your mama, your auntie, your cousins and them, everybody. Get them on tonight, because there's not, listen, it is hard to find a family that has not been touched in some way by the topic that we are dealing with tonight. You may not have been touched by this issue personally, but there's somebody in your sphere. Now, we're going to learn a little bit about those statistics, but there's somebody in your world, somebody in your church, somebody on your job, somebody in your classroom, somebody on your street, who has been touched by this issue, and we want to help you tonight. We want to help resource you of how you can minister to them, how you can help them, how you can direct them in a way to be able to find a fix or at least somewhere to go to deal with some of the situations that we're in. Now, we've been very coy about what the topic is. So what is the topic, Dr. Henry? What's on the table tonight, my friend?
All right. Listen, the topic is we are raising awareness on domestic violence. That's what we're doing tonight. We're raising awareness.
I got my purple. I know it's a lot of I got my purple.
I think I got something. Oh, man.
Man, you messed me up, man. I had to dig deep to find this big paisley purple thing, and then you left me hanging, man. I'm out here purpling by myself.
I didn't get the memo, man. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't listen to the chat. Something's going on.
It was in the chat.
My heart was there. My heart is
all right,
there.
let's go. So that's what's on the table. Talk to it. Let's get who's at the table today.
All right. Here we go. Listen, we have Erica Jones, who currently serves as the assistant director of women's ministry for the North American division. Listen, she is a powerhouse. She is someone that is very knowledgeable, and she goes out giving awareness regarding this topic. So we're so happy to have Miss Erica Jones here tonight.
All right.
Then, not only that, we also have with us tonight, we also have Dr. Rene Drumm. Now, let me tell you something. Dr. Drumm, she is my professor.
What? Your professor?
Right. Yeah, back in the day.
Oh my. The source of all the wealth of wisdom and knowledge. The fountain of it for Dr. Henry. I love it.
She's the dean of the School of Social Work from Southern Adventist University.
Wow.
And she does some adjunct teaching as well. Very knowledgeable, great person. It's so good to have these lovely women of God on here tonight.
All right. Well, let's bring them on, everybody. Here they are. Woo! They're in the building this evening. Very warm welcome from our non-live studio audience. Ladies, welcome so much to the Pastors Roundtable tonight. We are ecstatic and excited to have you this evening. We thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to hang out with us late on a Friday evening, at least those of us that are here on the East Coast. We want to just have a little word of prayer, and then I'm going to give you just a moment to say hello to our audience tonight, to just shout out anybody you want to shout out. Just give us a little bit more about where you are and what you're doing. But we want to begin tonight with a word of prayer. So if you would just bow with us for a quick moment as we ask the Lord to guide us. Father, we're asking you to guide us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, let's start with Dr. Drumm. We're going to give you 49.8 seconds to just give us a little shout out where you are, maybe a little bit more detail about what you're doing where you are. And then, Erica, we will toss it to you.
Okay, I am in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And I am doing independent research with the Institute of Church Ministry at Andrews University. So that's my home research base, and all kinds of things going on with collaborations. And Erica has a big one with our group coming up in November. I'll let her take it from here.
Okay, Erica.
It's great to be with you guys. Thanks for the invitation. I was born and raised in Maryland, and that's still where I reside. I work for the North American Division based in Columbia, where I have the privilege of being the assistant director for women's ministries. And a couple of the hats I wear are running an online mentoring program for young women and managing the End It Now North America initiative to bring awareness and draw attention to the problem of abuse that exists, yes, in our church.
Wow. Yeah, I think so many of us are very familiar with the End It Now initiatives and programs that we do in our local churches. We thank you so much for what you do to resource us to address that issue. All right, Dr. Henry, let's just dive in, and we want to just again invite our audience that's watching, our live audience, that you can at any time drop some questions, any of your comments in the chat. We will do our best to try to get to them if we can. Those of you that may be watching this on a replay, we invite you to drop a comment in a question or comment in the comments as well. All right, Dr. Henry, you're going to lead us off tonight, Doc?
All right. We're going to start right off with our first question. Again, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. Your knowledge is definitely going to be a blessing to all of us. So let's start off. Listen, the domestic violence. What really does domestic violence mean? Can you define that for us? I'm going to toss it to Erica Jones first.
I think when we talk about domestic violence, the word violence, right, we're thinking physical contact. But I think it's important to note that domestic violence or intimate partner violence can include more than just the act of physical violence. The definition actually includes everything from economic abuse, emotional abuse, which we might call psychological abuse. It includes stalking, sexual abuse. So this isn't just the act of physical violence against another person. There's a myriad of behaviors that go into domestic violence, the root of which is almost always power and control. We'll probably talk a little bit more about this as the evening goes on, but violence and abuse are not anger issues. They are not just, I'm mad, I hit something. The root of abuse and violence is power and control.
Wow. You named some violences there that I think many of us have never considered violence and maybe are even wondering, what is that? You said economic violence.
I was thinking about that too. Economic violence.
Can you unpack that just a tad for us when we say economic violence? Is that taking a wad of 50s and hitting somebody over the head with it?
It's probably been done, but this really refers to
sock full of quarters. Is that better?
Well, again, power and control, right? So I think about in this, it's easier to use the example of a female victim and a male perpetrator. So for ease of conversation, I will use those pronouns. But so if she has no access to bank accounts at all, he controls all of those finances and uses that as leverage, uses that to threaten. If you have children with somebody and he's threatening to withhold funds or not pay bills or these kinds of things, that is a form of abuse. And it's something that we don't talk about very often.
That's good.
Interesting. Yeah.
All right. As a follow-up, then, Dr. Drumm, is there, from your vantage point and in your field of work, is there anything that you would add to defining what domestic violence is?
I think I would add the aspect of a pattern of behavior. So not necessarily a one-time thing that happens between couples, but something that's a pattern of intentional harm, and that pattern is for the purpose of controlling the other person. So there's an intent, and it's harmful, and it's reasoned, and it happens over and over again. So I think that those are important elements to keep in mind when we think about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, spouse abuse.
Wow. Hey, and look who joined us, Dr. Wade, Pastor Wade, right in time. I think we've got now a pretty clear picture, a good picture of what domestic violence is, or at least we've gotten a start on that. So, Dr. Wade, is there something else then that we want to follow up with in regard to tonight? Or you want me to jump in? Okay, I got you. That look tells me exactly what I need to do. All right, so let's stay with you, Dr. Drumm, on the next question. So what are some of the statistics that we have? What's the scope and the breadth of domestic violence? So like what is the frequency that we see domestics happening? What's the context? Who are the victims? What do we know about domestic violence and its occurrence or the instances of it here in our communities, here at least in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the US, according to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, about 41% of women, 26% of men have experienced domestic violence in their intimate partner relationship.
Wow, 40? You said 46% of women.
41%.
41% of women.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And almost 20 years ago now, I was involved with a study. I led a study of Adventists and their experiences with abuse in their committed relationships and their intimate relationships. And for women, about 34% of them had experienced some type of physical abuse. Wow. And 20% of the men had at least one incident of physical abuse from their partners. So, and at that time, the comparable statistics were right in that ballpark. They've gone up since then, but I imagine they've gone up in the Adventist church as well.
Mm.
So to be clear, that study was not doing all of the varieties of abuse. It was simply physical.
No, we asked about sexual abuse as well, and emotional abuse.
Okay.
I don't think that we hit on finances. At least that's not popping into my mind as one of the things that we looked at. But in terms of emotional abuse, we had 44% of the total sample that said that their partner had told them what to do and expected obedience. 40% had experienced being insulted, sworn at, and being called names.
Wait. So it sounds like what you just said, and now, man, I'm getting into trouble with somebody tonight. It sounds like what you just said, that being told to do something with the expectation that you are to do it is a form of abuse. Is that what I was to extract from that?
That can get people off track a bit if you take a look at that item just in isolation.
Okay.
But remember, our definition of abuse needs to be a pattern of harmful behavior with the intent to control.
So is that considered then harmful behavior? Because I know that there's a whole lot of parents who are listening right now who are saying, wait a minute, I tell my child every single day to do something and I expect them to obey. Don't look at Dr. Henry right now. But it sounds like that there some sort of a clinical context where that is considered abuse.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up because that clarifies something really important. What we're talking about is only adults.
Okay.
Adult relationships with an intimate partner. We're not talking about family relationships, parent-to-child relationships, only adults with each other.
Yeah. Got it. Good. Wow. Phew, I know some parents are like, phew, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You know, one of the things that I'm realizing as you have described it, and as you were sharing on this last question, as you were bringing out the
wait a minute,
issues.
Doc. Let's get you on screen, Doc. Give us just a second here. We want to get you on screen. We want to hear you and see you. and all of that. We just had your picture up there, and I'm trying to find your camera,
Okay.
and I think we found it right there. No,
No, not yet.
where are you hiding at, Doc? All right, so this is what we're
That's
going
on
to
your
do.
side.
Pardon the interruption, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to copy Pastor Paul for a quick second, and then we're just going to swap out cameras right quick. And voila. Almost there. Mouse is messing up. There we go. There's
All
Dr.
right, all
Pastor
right,
Wade.
all right,
Okay.
all right. Now you can hear and see me. So as I was sharing, as I'm listening to how you described um, the various types of statistics, what's happening, I'm sitting saying, nah, that can't be true, because in the context, especially as we go into the next question, in the context of the group of friends that I have, um, I'm not seeing some of that, or if it's really happening, it's hidden. Do the what is the stigma that happens to victims, that they don't necessarily want to talk about the domestic violence that they find
Mm-hmm.
themselves in? Either one can answer that.
Go ahead, Rene.
Okay. So, when we think of domestic violence, when we think of someone hurting another person,
Mm-hmm.
in our heads, we think that is shameful behavior of the person who's doing it.
Mhm.
Shame on the person doing it. That's what we think. But when it's happening to you, when the junk comes on you, when you are being hurt, then the shame sticks to you as the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't want anybody to know that this is happening to you, because instead of the person that's doing the harm having the shame, it's the victim survivor that's having the shame and
Wow.
that's carrying that shame. And so it's really a hidden kind of thing that they don't want to talk about. They don't want people to know that it's happening to them because they experience that shame so intensely.
Mm.
Well, Erica, in what you do, if I may, Pastor Wade, follow up, in what you see when you're doing, End It Now and everything, there's maybe some of us who that's just so far from reality for us to figure out how in the world is a victim feeling shame for something that they are not perpetrating, they're not doing. Where does that come from? Where does this shame and this feeling that they can't tell anybody because it somehow makes them look bad? How does somebody get there from the perspective of being a victim?
Unfortunately, a lot of times they get there because of the poor response they receive from other church members,
Oh
from
wow,
people that are in
Wow.
positions of authority,
wow.
who question them, first of all, and say, I've never seen him act like that. I have a hard time believing he's capable of doing that. You have this layer of, what's next? If my husband is beating me, and that's, then we if we're going to get real here, is that a justification for divorce?
Mm.
Okay. You have this whole
Mm.
other layer of shame with the religious undertones of, my pastor doesn't believe me. Everybody thinks my husband, that I'm just using this for generality's sake, but everybody thinks my husband is a great guy. They don't believe me. Maybe this is my cross to bear. That's one we've heard a lot. And
Wow.
what's the next step for me? I leave him. What does my life look like then? So unfortunately, as a huge part of what we're trying to do with End It Now is not just to bring awareness, but to train our people, our members, our pastors, our administrators on how to look through a trauma-informed lens. And rather than feeling like I have to protect the organization, I'm going to protect the person. sitting in front of me. And we
Yeah.
do that not by asking a million questions, but by having information on knowing how to support and refer her, period.
I love that.
I think that
That's good stuff.
question is I think more easily understood for us as men or even a larger audience if we look at the victim as being a man, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm the one getting beat up or being abused, I'm the man. There's no way in the world I'm letting that out, because it says that somewhere I have failed. Somehow I'm not who I'm supposed to be, or I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be, and I don't doing what I'm supposed to do, and I don't want anybody to know that. So I will suffer alone. I'll suffer in silence, and then sometimes it's accompanied by, I would imagine, I'll figure it out. I will find a way, I'll find an answer, and I don't need any help because I will figure it out. And so it's not a matter of just not wanting to tell anybody and that being the issue alone, simply embarrassment. Sometimes it's like, okay, I got to try this and it didn't work. Well, I have to try harder, or I have to try better, or I have to try something else. So I think there's probably lots of different ways. I want to toss that back to Dr. Drumm. I did not ask you that question, but is there anything else that, as far as sourcing, where that kind of a shame and the reason why people stay silent in the midst of their victimhood?
I think they feel powerless, like they've tried this, that, and the other. Like you say, I'm going to figure it out. That was your approach. I'll get this. I'll figure it out. And they try a lot of different things. And one of the key aspects of abuse is isolation. So the abuser wants to make sure that no one supports this person.
Yeah.
And so they do things like show up at the workplace and show up at the workplace and cause trouble. And so then the spouse or the victim survivor gets fired, or they start putting down the mom and the dad or the brother, or just cause trouble at every moment that they can with any support. And so they lose support, they lose their livelihood, and so they just have no one other than the abuser. And that's all just very shame inducing, and they lose hope.
Wow. So listen, let me get to the next question, because I guess we're trying to get to how we can we're talking about raising their awareness. How has the church, and Erica, you may be able to begin this conversation. How has the church sought to address this issue, or does the church address the issue?
We've, at the North American Division, we've been hosting a yearly summit on abuse since, I believe, 2011. It's always been a free event that provides several hours of training by professionals, by experts on this specific issue, and targeted to our audience of a faith community. And there's still pushback. I mean, even up till this year, you still have people saying, I just don't think that happens here. And if we talk about it, you're opening the door for problems. And again, we're really trying to flip that narrative and say, no, we actually protect ourselves and the individuals by being transparent, by taking care of it safely, effectively. So the summit is one way. And at Now North America, our website has many resources, not just for domestic violence or intimate partner violence, but also a lot of child abuse resources. You think about your kids that are in Adventures pathfinders that go to camp. We cover that also, things that churches should be doing. But what can be difficult is the structure of the church is a beautiful thing and allows for a level of autonomy, right, at each level. So the local church decides what they're going to implement. So we want to strongly encourage and provide every resource we can for churches to implement protective policies. And again, for our pastors to understand how to look through a trauma-informed lens when someone does disclose to them. How do you take that disclosure? How do you support that victim survivor? So yes, I think we are addressing it. The tough thing is, at the end of the day, it's up to an individual church. It's up to each conference in terms of how they're going to implement certain policies and procedures. And like I tell people all of the time, we are human beings living in a sinful world. And this kind of thing does happen. It's going to happen. And instead of hiding from it, I want our people to know when they walk through those doors. I want them to see our posters. I want them to pick up a brochure in the restroom. I want them to know that we care.
Wow, that's good.
We see them, and that there are resources there to help them. But it's an ongoing conversation to have in this community to say, this does happen here.
Are we doing better as a church in addressing domestic violence from the local churches based on your overview of all the churches and from what you've been hearing, or are we not doing? We're just actually getting worse. What do you think, Erica?
I think that's difficult to say. I don't necessarily know that we're doing better or worse. I see growth. There's some places that I've gone where I just say, wow. I mean, they are just all in. They're hosting a special day. They've got resources available. They know how to refer victims when they disclose. And there's other places where, I'll just give you an example without, naming names or places, but very recently I had a conversation with someone in a position of authority. And one of their pastors was arrested for domestic violence against his wife. And this person said to me, it's a gray area. It's a he said, she said. And this administrator has a police report in his hand that one of his pastors has been physically violent against his own wife. And he said, well, it's a gray area. And I'll tell you exactly what one of our attorneys told me. Here's the legal precedent. Here's where the church standard should be. Wow. Okay. So you've got you have the gift, if you will, of I've got evidence in my hand that an Adventist employee is behaving this way. That's not a gray area for me. Shouldn't be a gray area for us. You're gone. You're done at that point. And whether you're prosecuted or not,
Erica,
is not where the buck stops.
I'd like to push back just a little bit on that. A police report is not a conviction. A Correct. Police report is, in fact, he said, she said. Police come to the residence, come to a place, and they write down what they are told from everybody that is there. And the police report is just the police saying, this is what we were told.
Yep.
And so I can get, if that's what that is, that is gray, because then lawyers take that into a courtroom and they argue over the veracity of that police report. Is that not, am I misunderstanding that that's how that happens?
You're not misunderstanding. Here, okay. Again, here's the difference. So the legal system, if the legal system only takes it to here, why would our church not say, as a pastor, as a person in a position of spiritual power and authority, that we have a report stating that you have been physically violent against your wife? Why is our standard not higher than that to say, we have to pause here. We have to take you out of, really, that's actually policy, is to now take you out of right? Your duties and responsibilities
Right,
until
right.
we figure out what to do next. That's not a gray area for me. And if we're talking about statistics, we need to know that less than 2%, you heard the statistics Rene gave of how many people deal with this in every year. Less than 2% of disclosures are false. Less than 2%. Those aren't odds that I'm willing to bet on, right? Less than 2% are false. When somebody says, this is what happened to me, I'm going to choose to believe, because my job isn't to investigate it. That's not a pastor's role to investigate it. The pastor's role is to support, to refer, and then to report to in this case, if it's a pastor that is the alleged perpetrator, to report that to the employer, who is the conference.
Right.
And I know it's uncomfortable. We're being it's a very uncomfortable conversation, because people are going, whoa, you're going to fire a pastor over this?
Yeah, well, so let's kind of just dig in on the policy, because I think what you said was the policy is now that pastor or employee, whichever, is with the allegation or with the police report is asked or is put on essentially something like an administrative leave, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
but that does not necessarily amount to a dismissal from employment.
Correct.
What's the, I know this isn't really, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but that's kind of where you were leading us, is that should be. So is it that the report itself, are you suggesting, should be grounds for dismissal from employment, or is it the ultimate findings not of the church? I think we're clear on that. We're not asking the church or the pastor or the conference even to do any particular investigations or whatnot. We're leaving that for law enforcement or for the authorities. But is it that we are waiting to find out something conclusive from that, or is that we're saying that simply the report itself is grounds or should be grounds for dismissal?
I think each case has to be handled individually.
Okay.
But as far as where policy takes this is, you need to be removed. You need to be put on administrative leave until
Perfect.
we figure this out.
Right.
Whether they take in law enforcement's report, whether they want a conviction. But I'm just saying, from where I sit and what I have experienced, I believe that at that point, serious action needs to be taken, because again, this is not, we've heard people say, I got angry and I hit her, right? This is, like Rene said, this is a pattern of behavior. So you don't send them to a couple of anger management classes and think you're good. Most perpetrator programs for perpetrators take at least 52 weeks. At least 52 weeks.
Wow.
And you're talking about somebody who owns their behavior, who owns the behavior and says, I did this and I need help. That's a story for another day. But as a church, I think we need to take a stand and say, yeah, maybe he wasn't convicted, but is it enough for us as a church to say this person is in a huge position of spiritual responsibility and authority, who is a shepherd over a flock, who I have a police report on my desk that he's hit his wife? That's what's the decision going to be?
Right,
Wow.
right. So as I'm hearing from you tonight, is there a line by line process in which an administrator or even a church pastor has to look at? I know you shared about the training, which may be in a seminar format, that may even have a test or maybe a certification. But is there something that I could, as a local pastor, when I come up against this, here are the things I need to do? Is there something written like that, or is it just hopefully that I will have enough information to act in the right way?
So are we talking about from a pastoral perspective, or are we talking about from an administration perspective?
Well, for both. Let's say for both. Even as a local pastor, who may run into this situation more often than an administrator, is there something that the local pastor has to say, okay, here's what's going to guide how we respond to it?
Well, are you talking about responding to a victim's disclosure or to another employee in the church?
A victim's disclosure.
A victim's
Because
disclosure.
I think
Yes.
that is the basis, even if, whether he's an employee or he's a member of your church, because I'm our role is to protect our members.
Yeah, and can we go with two things here? Because one is a victim's disclosure, but then there's a lot of pastors that are figuring like I suspect that something is going on. It looks like it might be. What do you do? I mean, how do you chase that down? Well, are there particular signs that are triggers? How do we look at both of them? One is the victim has actually disclosed it. What's the other from with somebody who is, I'm just guessing that this looks like this is what this is.
Rene, do you want to answer that in terms of red flags and signs?
Okay. Let me take a step back, though, before I do that.
Right.
One of the things that we got, if you want to call it, hit on about with that first study of 1,431 people answered this survey about abuse, right? And one of the criticisms was, well, you came up with all these people that are getting abused, 34% of women, 20% of men. And, okay, so we'll take that because of your high numbers and all, but really, it's probably their spouses were not part of the Adventist church. They probably married outside of the church. And so, it was really on them that they got in these bad situations, right? So, with the follow-up survey, we interviewed 42 women survivors of abuse. And we made it a point to ask what was your own relationship to the church and what was the abuser's relationship to church. And out of those, 90% of the abusers were active members of the Adventist church. Of those, 5 were pastors, 6 were elders, 5 were deacons. We had a conference secretary, we had church board teachers, we had church board chairs, we had Pathfinder leaders, Adventist university professors, chaplains, hospital administrators, and school board chairs. So it really ran the gamut of who were acting abusively towards their spouses. And I think that that's probably the number one thing that pastors need to know is that it could be there every week that is acting abusively toward their spouse. And if they know that can happen, then when the wife comes or the spouse comes and said, hey, I just wanted to share with you, I need to tell somebody and I trust you. My husband's beating me up. And then it's the pastor's job to say, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to hear that. I believe you. And I have a number for you to call. I'll call with you if you want. And I know the right people to call to help you from here. And so if we can get pastors just that far, just to say those words and to know who to call, then that's all the response that's really needed.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I was a little distracted by the chat there. Were there some of the signs that you pointed out as far as what the pastor is looking for outside of being told that this is what's happening?
So prior, they could be on the lookout for what we talked about earlier in terms of isolation. If they see that a couple is very isolated, they don't have any friends, they don't hang out with anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
and especially if there are if there seems to be money in the family, but one of the two doesn't have any access to any finances, then that's a problem. If they notice a pattern of low self-esteem, being depressed or anxious, if there are continual complaints of physical problems, headaches, insomnia, cuts, bruises, um, times in the hospital, those are all red flags.
Wow. All
Mm.
right. All right.
Well,
Well,
well.
listen, we want to take a quick break. We're
Mhm.
going to come right back to our guest in just about 2 minutes. So stay right there, guest audience, stay right there. We want to just take a quick moment and thank we lost our co-host again. Let me see if I
Ooh,
can get him back
bring him
in.
back. Bring him back.
Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Oh, that's
Assignment.
okay.
You need to make an assignment. I
There we
like
go.
that
There was
picture.
an
I like
assignment.
that picture.
It's already
There was
there. It's
a-
just that we had to make an assignment for the assignment
Right.
because the assignment was not in place.
My Lord, my Lord.
Hey, well, listen,
Well,
if you are just joining us tonight
yes.
on the Pastors Roundtable, we want to thank you for joining us this evening as we talk about this very, very important topic.
Listen.
We've had some
Domestic
good
violence,
discussions so far. If you've missed it up to this point, we want to invite you to rewind, go back, check it out
Yeah.
from the very beginning. We've talked about some of the definitions of what domestic violence is. We've talked about some of the responses that church leaders and church leadership and individuals should have when it comes to both identifying and responding to domestic violence when it shows up. But there are some other things we want you to know tonight about the Pastors Roundtable. Pastor Wade, can you talk to our audience very quickly if they have missed any edition of the Pastors Roundtable? How can they go and find out more information or see some of the past episodes?
Well, listen, we are so excited about the topics that have been coming through Pastors Roundtable that we have placed them on our website. So you can go to our website, theprt.live, and you will have every single episode that we have already done. You can watch, rewatch, and watch again. There are some that have information, resources that can help you. So the prt.live is the place you want to go to see where we have been.
All right. And just before we get back to our guest tonight, Dr. Henry, people who are watching tonight live right now, there's one more thing that they can do. They've got a little bit of time left, but tell them, Doc, what is it that they can do tonight?
You have some time, just a little time to share this feed. Let me tell you something. We're talking about domestic violence and in the church. It's happening in the church.
Mercy.
And we often minimize it. And so now we're bringing it to the light. We're bringing an awareness to leaders, to the congregation, to let them know that this thing is real and we have to do something about it. So please share this feed. We're coming up on some questions now that I think is really going to be an eye opener, and it's really going to help us to get the word out that this thing is happening and there is help out there.
All right. I need to check Rodney right quick. Can I do it? Can I do it live?
No,
Rodney,
don't.
I gotta stand up. I gotta stand up for my guys, man. Where'd it go? Rodney says that the pastors, where'd it go? Got defensive, brothers. Listen, Rodney, don't blame what I say on my co-host. That was me talking. I was asking questions. Don't be putting brothers in this stuff. Don't be saying pastors. If you want to direct it to me, direct it to me. But don't be throwing these guys out there. Rodney, you're our guy. We appreciate you, man. But I'm gonna check you when you're wrong. All right. All right. Let's bring our guest back. And we've got really this is we're going now from he says smile. We're going from the pastor's role and the pastor's job and his awareness of figuring out what to do. Did we leave anything out? I know we kind of cut and went to the little break. Is there anything else in terms of, and can we even broaden this to, you've got church leadership, whether it is at a conference level or in the local leadership level. are the assessments the same? Is the protocol the same when you either hear from a victim that this is happening or you suspect it? Is there anything different from what a pastor should do than an elder or a deacon or a church member or a conference official? How is there any difference from what we've heard at this point as to how they might address or assess whether or not they see domestic violence going on around them? Yes,
No,
and I'm
I don't
throwing
think
that out to
there's
either
any
of you because
difference.
that's a. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Ms.
No,
Jones.
I don't think there's any difference in how we approach that. It's being sensitive, it's being sympathetic, it's saying, just like Rene said, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Here's how I can, here's a number that you can call, here's a website you can visit, here's a local shelter, how can I help? And again, we're going to be releasing some resources this year that are going to be very, very helpful in that process. I want to mention, number one, I want to be very clear that not all pastors are bad and not all administrators are bad. And there are a lot of wonderful people and really good intentioned people working for this church. The really tough thing about this is when it happens in a faith community, there's another layer to this, that when somebody that's in a position of spiritual authority says, I don't believe you, whether they use those words or not, they're basically saying, I don't believe you, or they dismiss it. The other layer to this is that person is standing in a place of representing Christ a lot of the time. People look up to their pastors. They look up to their spiritual leaders. And so how we treat people in a time of crisis, of any type of crisis, but this kind of trauma, it really matters. And we did a survey of pastors last summer during the Called Convention and, asked a number of questions. But one that was very interesting is we said, what prevents you from addressing this, even from the pulpit, once a year? What prevents you from doing that or having the brochures out? And the top answer was, my congregants are uncomfortable.
Wow.
With that. That was the number one answer.
Wow.
So the other side of this coin is there may be pastors out there that say, hey, I would do that. I'm open to that. People are just really uncomfortable with it. And to them, I want to say, I hear you. Own that. It is an uncomfortable topic. This is not fun to talk about. Own it. Be a leader, be a spiritual leader, and say, we are going to address this as a church family, because on any given Sabbath, there is somebody sitting in a pew somewhere who is living this.
Rene, before we get to our last question, I want to stay on this for just a minute or two longer. Those of us that pastor, we often get the church member who has heard that something is going on with somebody, and it comes to us sometimes in two ways. One, the church member who's not been a victim thinks that somebody is being a victim, and they come and say, hey, pastor, I think this is going on. You need to have a conversation with, or they won't even say that. They'll say, just thought you should know. That's typically what we'll hear. Just thought you should know. So there's that scenario. And then there's the other scenario where the church member will have the victim come and say, this is what's happening. And then the church member will not report, will not say anything. They will say, well, I think you need to go and talk to the pastor. And as many people have brought up in the chat, and I get this, and I think that there's a lot of truth to it. Pastors often, sometimes the first reaction is to want to protect the organization as opposed to the individual. And again, I'm with you, Eric. I'm not saying that all pastors are that way, that not all administrators are that way, but there is, we have history. So for that member, is there an alternative rather than saying, go and talk to the pastor? And then sometimes that individual will come and talk to the pastor and will not say things as directly to the pastor as they have with a friend or a church member. And so the pastor is kind of maybe left out there. I don't know what you just told me, because you didn't really, So is there any advice or recommendations for that member who has that firsthand information, whether they've witnessed it or just heard it? What should they do? Is that recommendation to go and tell the pastor, or is there some other additional thing that they should do?
I don't think that it hurts to tell the pastor, but the pastor needs to expect that if that friend eventually does come and talk to them, at least the first time they chat, it won't be some disclosure about abuse. It's just going to step the toe in the water to see, are you a safe person?
Yeah.
And to see, I had a friend, I'll say a friend of mine. She worked at a hospital, and there was a chaplain there, and she was going through horrific abuse. And that chaplain didn't know it, but he saved her life,
Wow.
because she would go by his door and he would look up and he would smile and he'd say, "How's your day going?" And she would lie, but she would say, "It's okay." And when she had that small, short connection,
Mm.
she she knew she could make it through her day. And it's just being there. Truly, it's just being there for a person until they're ready to disclose, until they're ready to share. That makes the big difference. And so if you hear, as a pastor, if you hear from someone else that their friend is being abused, then you need to be the support person for the friend,
Oh, wow.
because that friend is going to really go through some hard times being the support person for someone who's being abused.
Mm.
It's a
Mm.
tough
Wow.
role, because they have to hear stories that they don't want to hear, and they don't understand why the person isn't getting out. Why don't they just leave? And so it's a tough role to be that support person. So the pastor can be a support person for the support person, and that can be good enough sometimes.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
That's big. Ms.
Um,
Jones, anything to add to
yeah.
that?
No, no, I would just firmly agree with that.
Good.
hmm I do have something I want to say before we kind of get to the next question there. There are a lot of myths that are out there regarding the victim, and things that some people think, oh, you just leave and so forth. Can you kind of unpack some of those myths that are out there regarding domestic violence, regarding sometimes the take that clergy have on it? I was doing a little research, and some clergy, they minimize it. Some clergy, they say, stay in the relationship. They rather preserve the marriage, and then when that person is getting abused, it oftentimes leads to someone dying. You know what I mean? Can you kind of unpack those myths that are out there regarding this subject? Because I think it's so important.
You
Uh,
said for
Doctor,
better or for worse. You
right? You said
said
for
till
better, for
death
worse.
do
You
us
never,
part. You
you
said.
know, Doctor, anyone, Doctor Drumm, can you unpack some of those myths that are out there so that people have a proper understanding on the gravity of this situation?
Yeah, I say some of the biggest myths are it's really not that bad. Uh, it, she's just complaining. Let me share with you a quote from one of our victim survivors. Um, she was wanting to get away,
hmm
and so she did. But what the aftermath of that was this. About 6 months after we were married, I decided I'd made a huge mistake and that I needed to reverse it, and I left. The day I left, he threatened to shoot me with an M16 machine gun. He pulled it out and started shooting the tires on my car. I left and went to my parents' house explaining to them what was going on, and their thought process was that this was a decision you made.
Wow.
And you know, when you get married, it's for life. You have to
Mm.
take the good with the bad. And I guess I always reached out to my parents thinking that they were going to be there to kind of console me and help me. But the attitude was always a pretty strict Adventist belief that once you're married, it's for life, regardless of the circumstance, that God obviously put you in that situation for a reason and that you need to deal with it. You need to
Hmm.
make the best of it. So I did. I went back.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was her story, right? So that speaks to some of the myths, like God put you in that position, so you have to stand up and be strong, and that you're there for life, even if your own life is in danger. So um,
Mhm.
it is really bad. It isn't just um, little spats that
Yeah.
husbands and wives get into. It gets really seriously dangerous.
Yeah. Erica, if you could just, if there's some myths out there that you probably want to address as well, because I think it's so
I
important.
mean, yeah, I think one of the big ones is, she could just leave, and you
Yeah.
can do a lot of quick and easy research on why victims can't just leave. Number one, their personal, just their risk of death. I mean,
Hmm.
goes up extraordinarily. They are at um, they are the most vulnerable when they decide to leave. Um, So it's not that easy. You can't just always walk away. And you have to think about somebody being in a position where, like we said, finances have maybe been controlled. They may or may not be able to see their children. There's just so many layers to it that to say, why can't you just leave is really not a good answer. Um, I also wanted to, someone in your chat, Laura said, aren't you as a leader legally bound to take some form of action when abuse is happening? And I do want to address that because we again need to differentiate between abuse between two adults and child abuse. If you have an adult come to you and disclose, you cannot report that without their consent. I want to be very clear about that. So even if they come to you as a pastor and say, this is happening to me, you need their consent. And that can be part of the question, is to say, would you like me to help you report this? But if the answer is no, you do not report that without his or
Mm.
her consent. If it is a child, if it's a minor, in almost all states in the United States, you are a mandated reporter as a pastor, as somebody working with children, and that you are legally bound to. But I just want to make that distinction. If an adult discloses to you, you are not legally bound to make a report, and you really should not do that without their consent. Somebody said alcohol and drugs and mental illness cause domestic violence. Yeah, again, there's not a one size fits all to this, but other things can add fuel to the fire. But this is not an anger issue. This isn't, I got drunk and made a mistake. This is a pattern of behavior with the intent to harm, and we need to keep that in mind.
So before Dr. Henry asks his last question, and that question is geared towards how the victim, I want to ask, what are some practical things a church can do
Mm-hmm.
um, that we're not doing? This subject, number one, is not spoken about in the church.
Mhm.
It only comes up privately. But what are some open things that a church can do to make the atmosphere comfortable folks to feel that, hey, I may have some help here, or I can get some help here? What are some of the things that church can do, practical things?
I mean, one of the number one things we tell churches to do that is really very simple and goes a really long way is having resources displayed, having them readily available, whether it's a national hotline, whether it's local resources, whether it's our End It Now resources. Like I said, brochures being out. We have a very tiny one that we encourage people to have in the restroom so people can very subtly and conspicuously put it in a shoe, in a purse, in a pocket. Having that out there is a subtle but powerful message to somebody that their church recognizes that this could be happening to somebody that is there. So that's an easy one. And another one is we just want to encourage the End It Now Emphasis Day is an official day on the church calendar. It's the fourth Sabbath in August. And so again, people that say, well, we're not comfortable with that, maybe it doesn't happen. No, this is an official day on the calendar. We make all of the materials for that available to you. There's a sermon, there's a PowerPoint, there's an afternoon seminar. I mean, anything you could need to just bring awareness for just one day a year to this is really, really important. And of course, we want to encourage people to attend the trainings that we have beginning this year in November, and that we will continue to have yearly. But those are two places to start. Just openly display resources and have a day, at least one day a year, that you focus on this and highlight it.
Wow. Excellent. So we define domestic violence. We're talking about the implications of it. I'm assuming, that somebody who's watching now might be abused, right? And so what can the victim do to get some help and to get out of the situation? And then if you could also talk to us about the difficulty that the victim oftentimes have, because there's just so many different, like you said, there's different layers of different things, different components, different factors, and so it's difficult for these victims to get out of it because of these other factors. Can you talk to us about that, Erica?
I'm going to let Rene address
Okay.
that. I don't like to put a whole lot of it. It's a tough question, because I think, well, what should the victim do? It's putting the responsibility on them to do something. And really what's interesting is, again, from surveys we've done and research that's been done, we find that a lot of people do go to their faith community first. They go to their pastor first when they're ready to disclose and tell somebody, which is why it's so important that as a church we get this right. But beyond that, I'll let Rene answer.
Okay.
So if a person is wanting some resources that they haven't thought of before, that you folks could pass on to the pastors, like in the chat, I saw just briefly, every state has a coalition against domestic violence. Every state in the United States. And so all you have to do is Google that, and it will come up. There'll be a toll-free number. You can call that. You can get information about where the nearest places that you could talk to someone. Almost all counties now have a designated agency that deals with abuse. And so you would likely be able to find the right number close by where you could call and get help. And that sometimes United Way has a hotline too that you dial 211, and just ask. It might be a recorded line, it might be a live person answering, but ask about abuse services and what services are available in the county that you're in, and you could get help that way as well.
Mm-hmm. So there's different resources out there to get some help, and you mentioned some of those already. And then also, dispelling some of these myths. And again, one myth is just leave, but there is a difficulty in doing that, and I think we kind of mentioned it in several places in our podcasts. Can you mention some of those difficulties, and then also mention although these are difficult factors that a lot of our victims are in, actually all of them are in, there have been people who were able to still make that call. And I think we're advocating that now. And for pastors to provide that safe place and to encourage those victims to make that call despite those difficulties. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think that's so important, because I think, and again, without doing any research, I know you all have done the research, but I think that for some of the victims, it's very difficult for them to speak out because of those factors. And some of them will probably stay in silence because the factors are real and they may not see any hope. So I think if we can address some of those difficulties, but address the benefits of making that call, so that we can encourage those people who are getting abused to, or the pastors to provide the safe place, so that something can be done so that they get out of their situation. Dr. Drumm, can you address any of that?
As far as leaving, victim survivors try a lot of things. And even contacting shelters and going to a shelter. Statistically, victim survivors will leave 6 to 8 times before they leave for good.
Okay.
So they do leave, but the odds are against them in so many ways. Just like the woman that shared her story about leaving and then being shot at with an M16 machine gun. Her parents were on the side of, you married this guy, you better stay married to him, right? And so there are so many factors that play against leaving, especially in a religious context. So finances are difficult, and also there'll always be threats. The threat of, okay, you know that we're married for life, and if you leave, I will kill you. And if she's not worried about herself being killed, then I'm going to kill the kids too, and I'm going to kill your parents and your brother. Those threats are real, and it's just a scary, scary thing.
But Erica, so again, we have people out there right now that are in this situation. What hope can we give them?
I think one of the factors that plays into the difficulty of leaving is that regardless of how horrible the situation, it's a known factor, right? There's a known, it's horrible, but you know it, versus the unknown. The unknown has the possibility of a better life, but it's unknown. And you're most likely going to be on your own. You don't know who's going to support you. You don't know if you're going to have your kids or not. So you have to recognize that it's not as easy as, well, as long as I'm out of this, it'll be better. And I think the best thing we can do, again, is to say there is hope, and you do not deserve this. And this is not your fault. That is more than anything, as a church family, to come to somebody and say, and I don't mean all of us come to this person, but as we train people for how to respond to this issue, it's saying this is never your fault, ever. And God, I believe, values the safety and well-being of that individual over the sanctity of the marriage covenant. I believe that because, as my good friend Rene Drumm said on a documentary we did several years ago, you can't minister to a dead person.
Come on.
I'll leave it at that.
That's good.
Right.
As we were talking there, I actually went on Google and did a search for domestic violence resources, and it actually pulled up resources even in my state. So it went straight to my state. I know Dr. Henry talked about someone watching right now. You may, even if you're on, the first thing came to my mind, even if you're on a shared computer, you may want to put a incognito window. Everyone, they don't have a way to look at the history, but you can find help even right now in your state. And I challenge you, in the chat, we have the National Domestic Violence Coalition website. There are a number of opportunities out there. The Salvation Army, non-church places that can give support to you if you're in this situation. And so even in our church, the End It Now campaign is major, but we're not getting it out there. Let me ask that question in terms of, as a pastor, how are we marketing the End It Now campaign to our churches? Because it's not everywhere. Are we doing it to the women's ministries of our churches? How are we marketing it so that churches can get access to the End It Now ministry?
So enditnownorthamerica.org is the best place to start. That's our website. Lots of free resources there. The archives from past summits on abuse are available. All of our free resources that you can order are available at adventsource.org, and it's actually under the tab for pastors. You'll see domestic violence resources there. Everything that we have created is completely free. You just have to pay the shipping costs. So, it's really it's about doing what we're doing here tonight, talking about it in an open forum, having the discussion, sharing the information, and just continuing to encourage people that this is not something to hide from, but to say, we own this, we recognize this, and we're going to do better.
Awesome.
All right.
Wow. I would dare say that we have scratched some surface stuff, and that there's probably even more. You mentioned the documentary, Erica, that you guys collaborated on. Can you give us a little information on that? Because I think it sounds like that's something that would be a resource for our audience. Tell us just a little bit about that before we wrap up tonight.
Absolutely. If you go to YouTube and you search for End It Now NAD, that's our YouTube platform, you will see the Church 2 documentary. It's in 3 parts and is a very informative look at abuse in faith communities. And Rene Drumm was one of the participants in that. So yeah, that's a great place to start. You'll also find some animated films on our YouTube page that show what to do and what not to do. And all of those are going to be featured in brand new manual that we are releasing next month called Safeguarding Peace. That will also be available on AdventSource, and I hope and pray will be a valuable resource to addressing a lot of the questions that we've discussed here tonight.
Awesome.
All right. Well, ladies, again, thank you so very much for hanging out with us at 10:23 on a Friday night, at least here on the East Coast. We appreciate your time and your contribution and the work that you do outside of programs like this. So thank you, Dr. Drumm, for training our illustrious pastors and teachers and those that you train, like Dr. Henry, and Miss Jones, for the fabulous work that you do, that I know my church church is taking a lot of advantage of, and pulling sermons off of for the End It Now weeks, and even those videos that you mentioned from the YouTube channel. We have used those as well. So thank you for the effort and the energy that you and your team put into resourcing the church to address domestic violence. Roger.
Right.
Yeah.
Take us out, man. Yes.
I'm totally excited for Erica saying yes. I know that this is a subject that's very hard to deal with, and so I thank you, Erica, for your ministry. I've been following. You also have a ministry to young girls, if I'm not mistaken, and I know a lot of these kinds of behaviors can be stemmed or addressed, especially to our younger ones, so that they don't fall into these things. So thank you for all that you're doing there. Dr. Drumm, thank you for joining us tonight. And we thank you to our viewers for joining us tonight. Please remember to share. And we thank you for part.
Oh, he froze.
With pastors around.
Okay.
Oh, relevant?
Resourced.
If I'm still
and real. God bless.
Take care, everybody.
God bless.